In early 2000, The Sims released to PC and has held a steady chokehold on the life simming community ever since. The first installation of The Sims was notorious for being quite hard to play and is quite different from The Sims we've grown to know and love. The Sims 2, released just 4 years later, improved on The Sims and is looked back fondly for not only its attention to storytelling but also the deep lore within The Sims townies. The Sims 3 came along just 5 years later, once again improving the Sims franchise. While storytelling was not at the forefront, it grew The Sims in other ways like the open world and endless customization. However, fast forward 5 more years, and the same cannot be said for The Sims 4. Once a franchise that had improved time and time again, The Sims 4 was released without many features of Sims past, like no pools, toddlers, open world, or even something as small as no burglars. Instead, we were greeted with gray neighborhoods, countless rabbit holes, and limited style options. It felt like a step backward, bursting open room for competition to The Sims. While a competitor to The Sims would have been welcomed earlier, it was now at the point where players were feeling more desperate to get their hands on a life sim not housed under EA. And that's exactly where Life by You comes into play. In 2019, Paradox Interactive, a gaming publisher with titles such as City Skylines and Stellaris, created a new studio called Paradox Tectonic. This new studio, unlike their main one in Sweden, was located in California. Along with this new home base, Paradox Tectonic was run by Rod Humble, a name that might not be familiar to the average simmer, but a name important in the life simulation space nonetheless. In the past, Humble worked for the Sims franchise, working on both The Sims 2 and 3, arguably the best implementations of the game. During his time with The Sims, he was deeply entrenched in the inner workings of the game, as he even said himself. It is a privilege to lead the Sims label team as we look forward to new ways of surprising and delighting customers in this rapid growth time for interactive entertainment of all kinds. In this role, Humble will be responsible for the Sims label, which develops and markets life simulation games and online communities with an emphasis on creativity, community, and humor. He stayed with EA until 2010 when he parted ways and instead took over the role as CEO of Linden Lab, where Second Life was produced. Second Life, while not a life sim, gave players the opportunity to create their own avatar and discover virtual worlds together. But he only stayed with that company for around 4 years before pivoting once again. Only this time, he'd no longer be working or manning someone else's company. No, he'd be running his own Chap Hat that creates video games, music, and art. In the 10 years since its founding, it seems his company has a debut album and a game, Colts and Daggers, under its belt. Colts and Daggers, a strategy game, is quite different from the Sims game Rod Humble had worked on previously, but it seemed he could not stay away from those Sims roots for too long. Just 5 years after starting his own company, Humble joined forces with Paradox to begin work on Life by You. When Paradox Tectonic was announced to the world, Humble said, "Our studio structure is using best practices for modern development. A flat organization is a low-friction environment with a team of highly experienced domain experts." Humble continued, "It's a privilege to be reunited with so many world-class colleagues from so many AAA projects, and the team and I are delighted to join Paradox and be part of driving the company's next cycle of growth. Our shared values of quality and putting the customer first made Paradox the perfect fit for us." While no mention of Life by You, even back in 2019, there was speculation of a Sims competitor being under development. However, any such announcements would have to wait for 4 years. And in that time, Paradox Tectonic, which towards the end of its life had around 24 people on the team, started off and ended off with presumably less overall workers than what you would see on the Sims team, as can be shown in the credits for one of the Sims expansions. That's not to say a small dev team could not pull off such an accomplishment. Paralives is a good example of this, but I do think it helps put things in perspective. With a much smaller team in every aspect, Paradox would have to work smarter, not necessarily harder. Having Rod on the team, in theory, should have helped make the team work smarter with his experience on past Sims games. Even if he did not have his hands directly on the code, he would have likely been privy to how The Sims was coded, at least in its structure. And well-designed code can go a long way in making the development process less painful. With well-structured code, it would be easier to find and fix bugs, and bugs, as we'll learn, are in fact a key contributing factor to each of Life by You's delays. But before we can really get into the downfall of the game, we need to better understand what Life by You was trying to accomplish. What exactly was Life by You bringing to the table that The Sims hadn't already? According to the now deleted Life by You page, Life by You is designed to be one of the most moddable and open life simulation games, where you are in total control of the humans that you create, the towns that you build, the stories that you tell. In short, Life by You wanted to be a life simming game that gave the players endless options for customization. Instead of just relying on modders to create more depth for the game, it seemed Paradox wanted to add a lot of that depth themselves, targeting more of a Sims 3 play style, which in theory is a noble cause. But perhaps the scope began to become too large. Let's take a look at Paralives, for example. Their scope for their initial launch in 2025 is smaller and more manageable, yet people are just as excited for this launch. You could even take The Sims 4 as yet another example. Upon release, Sims 4 was missing so many features, like I mentioned before. It took them years to implement some much anticipated features. To be clear, I'm not saying this is necessarily a good tactic, but The Sims 4 is the most established life sim game out there, and they even struggled to deliver upon first release. Is it really no surprise that the smaller team at Paradox could not live up to the expectations they had set, not once, but 3 times? Because, yeah, they did miss 3 of their early release deadlines. Upon their official announcement of the game, 4 years after Paradox Tectonic had formed, they gave September 12th, 2023 as the official date of early release. To their own admission in their announcement stream, they recognized that the game had a huge scope and that they were relying on the community to expand the game. However, they reassured viewers that the core game mechanics were in place and a lot of the key moments had already been added.
We've been working on this game for a really long time. The core mechanics are there, and we have some really fun and innovative features, as you've just heard.
In between release and early access, they anticipated just adding more depth, user feedback, polishing up some graphics, and fixing any potential bugs. In addition to the announcement stream, they released several videos on their Life by You YouTube page of some of the work they've done so far. It's evident at this stage it was not quite ready for release. Even in these videos, which you would assume would be more polished for viewers, you could see the game was laggy and the graphics were lacking. People were not shy to call this out. On top of that, some people have speculated some of the graphics were pulled straight from the Unity store. Whether or not this is actually true is besides the point, since either way, it means one thing. The graphics were not unique to Life by You. Sure, you could say the graphics were reminiscent of The Sims 3, but that's not necessarily a selling point. The Sims 3's last update was a decade ago, and graphics have advanced so much in that time frame. Now, they had some time in between March of 2023 with their official announcement before September 12th rolled around. But before that date could come pass, early access was delayed until March 5th of 2024, almost a full year after their official announcement. Rod cited some improvements that were key contributors to why early access was delayed. Visual improvements, gameplay tuning, user interface style overhaul, and bug fixing, as well as modding tools for the modding community. While their attention to the community was very appreciated, especially when it sometimes feels like everyday players are unheard by The Sims, this does seem, in hindsight granted, like an area that maybe they could have scaled back, at least for the initial launch. Again, I can understand they want to provide everything The Sims 4 couldn't or wouldn't, but that doesn't mean all these features need to be available upon release, let alone early access. Let's take a look at their feature that modifies dialogue.
Edit the whole conversation through the conversation editor like we've shown you before. You can adjust trees, write custom conversations, but let's say you don't want to do all of that and you just want to adjust a certain response or you want to give your character a specific kind of tone. Well, let me show you how you can do that right now. Let's start by going into a romance option here. I don't know what kind of person he is, but I do feel like maybe he'd like something a little bit more punny, maybe a little bit sciencey, so I'm going to go with the second option here. Let's click the edit button and add new text. Once I'm here, I can basically just start typing. So I'm going to go with a pickup line, the classic, "Are you a proton?" because I'm feeling a positive connection. Let's see how this goes. I click OK to save the option, then I go ahead and click on it. Okay, he failed chemistry, but that doesn't feel like an outright failure. It feels like maybe we didn't vibe, but he didn't reject me.
Here, they give you the ability to change the dialogue options, but it does not actually change the actual intent behind the dialogue. It's just window dressing for a game that still needed some more attention than just some fine tuning. They also mention adding more languages to early access, as well as French, German, English, and Spanish. We're also adding Italian and Portuguese for the start of early access. Being inclusive should not ever be seen as a downside, but I do think this shows their lack of clear direction. They had to delay early access, and instead of hunkering down and reducing scope, they extend the deadline and add even more items to the list. Alongside this first delay, they also added a special extra thank you to all of our pre-order and wish list customers. We're adding a nightclub vibe pack, which is a bunch of furniture that's kind of nightclubby, and we also can use it in game for nightclubs. Again, while their intention to reward the community seems well intentioned, I think this just further highlights the cracks in the game development's journey. In one of their videos, Rod says, "Please help us direct the game you want to play." They want to nurture builders, character creators, achievers, storytellers, and it seems like the scope is ever growing, making the stretch to get to early access larger and larger. And so, Life by You was then again delayed for a second time. This time, the release was delayed until June 4th, 2024.
Hello everyone. We are moving the start of early access for Life by You to June 4th, 2024. We absolutely still will be an early access title, and we're still going to be listening to your feedback all the way through early access.
In their post about the delay, they directly addressed what would happen in case of another potential delay. While we feel confident that another change will not happen, we also know that no one can guarantee that promise. Quality and your satisfaction is our top concern, and we hope to continue to make decisions that prioritize that. Again, Again, their reasoning for the delay seems to be the same as before. They want to fix bugs, performance and stability, character art, building assets, mod tool usability. If we believe what they said in the Life by You announcement stream, then all the core gameplay should be there. At this point, it seems like they're now entering a cycle of continually trying to add features, bloating the game, which takes more time, thus delaying release after release. Not to mention, with each new feature added, new bugs will be introduced alongside them, creating even more work. Rod, in the delay announcement video, even said some of the bugs were getting in the way. As the development continued, you could see in some of their videos they posted that improvements were being made. The graphics were looking better, and they do show off more features like jobs, crafts, shopping, just to name a few. But they never do any videos with extended gameplay or any videos with several game features working alongside each other. And yes, there is actually a video on the Life by You page called A Day in the Life tutorial with Fake Gamer Girl. But you will notice it is not raw gameplay footage, and moreover, a purposefully edited video so any potential bugs or discrepancies can't be caught. One thing people in the comments did mention was the lack of other people in the game. It was almost eerie how lifeless it was. This then prompted me to look for any gameplay footage of the game by other creators, and quite frankly, there was none. I did find some creators who said they got to play the game early, but they never showed their own gameplay, just what we had previously seen on the Life by You YouTube channel. The only other time game content had been made by creators was when it was uploaded directly to the Life by You channel. Dr. Gluon partnered with Life by You to make a few videos, and if you look for any corresponding gameplay on his channel, none exists. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but at the same time, all gameplay we've seen has been edited and then presumably approved by the Life by You team. In contrast, another competitor in Zoe has actually given creators access to an early version of the game and even allowed them to stream it. And this lack of direct gameplay was a precursor for the end of Life by You. Unfortunately for the team and awaiting players, the team would never have the opportunity to address all the fixes as the game was once again delayed in May of 2024. Only this time, there was no new early access date given, and this announcement was quite different from the others. It was written by the deputy CEO of Paradox Interactive. It says, "Hello everyone. After much consideration, we regret to announce that we have decided to retract Life by You's early access release date previously set for June 4th. This was not an easy decision, especially since we understand the anticipation and excitement that many players have for the game. However, we believe that additional development time is needed. While we would have preferred to commit to a new release window, we believe it is more prudent to hold off while we plan ahead, rather than committing to a new date that we cannot be certain to meet. We will provide more information as soon as possible. Until then, we want to sincerely thank you for your continued support and patience." Instead of describing all the focus areas like the delays of the past, this delay announcement is more vague. With some foresight, it's clear leadership at Paradox have been talking about the future of Life by You and whether or not the game should continue. I think it's interesting that the delay announcement does not mention them trying their best to work on providing the game in the future. Rather, it ends on quite an ominous note that they don't know if they'll be able to meet another early release deadline. And exactly a month after this announcement, in which no new content was posted to YouTube or the Life by You website, the game was officially canceled, and here is the statement. "Sadly, we've decided to cancel the release of our long-awaited life sim, Life by You. This was an incredibly difficult call to make and is a clear failure on Paradox's part part to meet both our own and the community's expectations. We realize this raises some large questions. Here we hope to shed at least some light on why we opted to cancel rather than delay as we communicated earlier. Life by You has been in the works for a long time, and we've been very excited about the promise and the potential of the game. Our hope was always that it would be able to leave a mark in this exciting and new genre for us. That's why we opted to delay it twice, to give the studio and the game a fair shot at realizing the potential we saw. For each delay we made, we've seen incremental improvements, which in hindsight may well have led us to focus on details rather than the whole picture. A few weeks back, we decided to hold off on early access release in order to reevaluate Life by You, as we still felt that the game was lacking in some key areas. Though a time extension was an option, once we took that pause to get a wider view of the game, it became clear to us that the road leading to a release that we felt confident about was far too long and uncertain. This is not to say the game has not shown any promising qualities. Life by You had a number of strengths and the hard work of a dedicated team that went into realizing them. However, when we come to a point where we believe that more time will not get us close enough to a version we want to be satisfied with, then we believe it is better to stop. This is obviously tough and disappointing for everyone who poured their time and enthusiasm into this project, especially when our decision comes so late in the process. At the end of the day, our job is to release games that are fun, interesting, and challenging for our players, and our every decision should be taken with that purpose in mind. When we get that right, we earn our pay. So how do we ensure we don't find ourselves here again? Honestly, there are no real guarantees. Games are difficult to get right and will definitely make mistakes, which, as these things go, always become painfully apparent in hindsight, but still shouldn't reach this kind of magnitude regardless. We have to take a long and hard look at what led us here and see what changes we have to make to become better. In the end, our mission remains the same, and we'll continue to take whatever steps we need to do just that. And based on Paradox's track record, it really shouldn't be too much of a surprise that they ultimately ended up feeling this way towards Life by You. 1 year prior, Paradox had actually closed 2 of its studios because development was decentralized. In doing so, Paradox wanted to focus more on their core games, of which Life by You is not. Despite that, though, Life by You continued development even after these other studios closed, but as we saw, the game kept getting delayed, and Paradox kept taking hit after hit. City Skylines 2, an anticipated sequel to City Skylines, came out towards the end of 2023 and was riddled with performance issues and bugs. This release left many players dissatisfied, and it seemed like instead of potentially repeating a lackluster release like this, the heads at Paradox instead chose to cancel the game entirely. And it seems like they did so without informing the team at Paradox Tectonic first. One employee says, "Today I found out the studio I work at is shutting down and that layoffs are on the way." He goes on to thank the fans. "Thank you for supporting Life by You. Thank you for your direct and honest feedback. It changed the game for the better when our voices alone couldn't. Thank you all for your input. It helped us advocate for the changes we believed in." Reading in between the lines, it seems like player feedback had more sway than the team's, and perhaps that's why in their initial announcement, they stated they were already done with the core game mechanics. Of course, we may never truly know for sure, but as Paradox Tectonic closes its doors, it does seem like more and more cracks are appearing. If we take a look at another employee's post, an employee of which you can actually find doing some of the videos in the Life by You YouTube videos, he goes on to say, "Today I am devastated to announce that for the second time in 2 years, my game has been canceled and I've been laid off. And this time it was a real shit show, y'all. I've known for some time that we might be getting shut down. We were actively working on a hypermoddable life sim called Life by You, an indie answer to the aging IP that is The Sims, but instead focused heavily on UGC. And as far as it goes, we were doing extremely well. I cannot share specific numbers, but I can say that we had an internal metric we were aiming for that had been approved, and that we exceeded that number by a significant portion. We also got a thumbs up a few weeks before launch. Without knowing specifics, we can really only speculate here, but I think this does go to show there was a real dissonance between the team at Paradox Tectonic and the broader management team at Paradox Interactive. Perhaps even months after closing down two studios for being disorganized, Paradox Tectonic met the same downfall. Now, taking a look back, they even mentioned in the cancellation post, it's easy to see all the game's faults, but it does seem like some of these hesitations management was having might not have been exactly communicated with the Life by You team. Then 2 weeks before launch, we were told we wouldn't be launching, and just now that we've all lost our jobs. We were only informed of this via a public announcement. We were not told why. Instead, we spent a month in purgatory and did everything we could to prove to them we were worth launching, including things like finding potential buyers or suggesting cutting ties and going indie. We heard virtually nothing back. I was warned against writing anything about this experience, that it may hurt my future career, or even that legal action could be taken against me. I have chosen to ignore these warnings. To be honest, I have guesses about what happened, and while I can't conjecture, I'm sure you have guesses too. As a business owner, some of them are understandable, but many of them are not. We were a strong team on a strong project, ready to launch to a strong audience. Really, I'd like to be much more fire and brimstone about it. I'm pretty pissed, not gonna lie. But I'm trying to stay kind and respectful, so instead I'll say this industry has become a place in which you can deliver more than expected, have AA money behind you, and still have the rug pulled 2 weeks before launch. Now, this employee particularly is quite biased in their opinions, and I don't think what they said can be taken as 100% truth, especially since this post was written so soon after the studio was dissolved, but I do think it shows a problem with Life by You as a whole. Not only were there cracks in the game itself, bugs, performance issues, of which the game actually increased its requirements shortly before it was delayed for the last time, but Life by You also had foundation cracks in the team. A game that seemed to have everything set up for itself: funding, time, a leader with life simming experience, whose legacy now will be rooted in the past, where you can visit him in The Sims 2, and the game still came crashing down. And all we can really do from this point is learn from Life by You's mistake. Fortunately for players, there are several other life sims on the horizon. We can hope they don't succumb to the same fate, but only time will tell.